Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unified Purpose, the podcast where we share inspiring tales of compassion, resilience, and community spirit. I'm your host, Oliver, Penji's nonprofit community coordinator, and I'm joined here with a very special guest, Eugene from Work on Climate. Thank you so much for joining me today, Eugene.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I appreciate that. So, before we dive into your organization, we're going to warm up with a quick game. The game for today is Explain It Like I'm Five. You will have 30 seconds to explain to me a topic in the simplest way possible. The topic
Let's
is
try.
random, and I'm going to give it to you in a couple of seconds. Are you ready?
Let's try it.
Okay, so the prompt for today is okay, this is climate related. How does a rainbow appear?
Ooh, how does a rainbow appear? So the way that a rainbow appears, light from the sun goes through
Got
the
it.
air, and when there are drops of water in the air, they change how different parts of the light go. So the light contains different colors, and drops of the water make different colors go in different directions, and that's how a rainbow appears.
Well, that sounds reasonable to me. I don't know much about the rainbows, about light, but that felt like a very good explanation. Thank you for telling us about all about the Eugene. So yeah,
Sure.
keeping off with the climate topic, we can start us off. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your story with work on climate?
Sure. So my background originally has nothing to do with climate or nonprofits or workforce development or talent mobilization. And here I am running a movement building nonprofit for talent mobilization in climate. So originally my background is in big tech. The first 15 years of my career, I was a software engineer. I studied for it. I worked most recently for 7.5 years at Google. Before that, I was working, at Google's competitor in Russia and other big data and cloud companies. So it was all a lot of fun. It was really fascinating. But around 2018 or 2019, I started gradually coming across more information about climate change. I think the first one that really got me scratching my head was when I was on a flight from San Francisco to Zurich while at Google, and I watched The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore. It's a very famous documentary that Al
Yep.
Gore put together about climate change. It's very powerful. And until then, I thought that it is, just something that the environmentalists care about, quote unquote. And then when I watched that, it really got me thinking, like, damn, it looks like it's really bad. It looks like it has the potential to really destroy our society as we know it completely, not just make it a little bit worse. Then on the flight back, I watched the sequel to it. Then I
There's a
started
sequel?
talking to people around. There is a sequel, yes. I forget what it's called, but it's also by Al Gore. I started talking to people around me. For example, Google actually has in-house climate and energy scientists. And at some professional development workshop, I met one of them, Dave, and I asked him, like, Dave, you're the expert. Is it really as bad as Al Gore says? And he was like, yeah, Eugene, this isn't even half of it. It's really bad. Somebody better do something. So I started reading some, literature about it as well. And basically it got to the point where it was, emotionally intolerable for me to keep working on anything that is not climate. And for people in the audience who are maybe not as familiar or think that it's um, not a big deal, so I won't go into the climate science, but like just to give you a sense of how I think about what its effects are. You may think, oh, just a few more degrees in the atmosphere, no big deal, just a slight change compared to what things are today. And certainly you're not going to die from heat because of climate change. That's not what's going to happen. Just like, when your body temperature rises by 4 degrees, you don't die of heat. It's just a symptom that your body is not functioning in the regime it's designed to. So really what's going to happen is, because of this slight change in the amount of energy atmosphere, we're going to have a slight change in continent boundaries, just a few hundred or a few thousand miles here and there. So basically,
Wow.
it completely rewires what areas of the earth are livable, what areas of the earth are possible to grow food in. And that all happens on a scale of decades, which is much faster than we possibly have the capacity to move our cities, move our infrastructure,
Yeah.
move where we grow food, and so on. So basically, what's going to happen is that the average case projections are that by 2050 there are going to be 1 billion people who are climate refugees. So they can no longer live in the place where they used to live. So this really freaked me out. Understanding
Kind of
this,
freaks me out too.
yeah, I mean, on one level it should. On the other level, I know that fear is not really the thing that propels people to action. So this is going to be the last time in this podcast that I talk about how bad things are. The
Yeah,
rest
it's
of it
okay.
is going to be about how we solve it.
We're gonna be hopeful.
Yeah. So basically, when I got really freaked out by this, I decided that I need to go. I need to leave Google to find a way to use my work to solve this problem. And around that time, I connected with my colleague from Google AI, Cassandra, who was also, as it turns out, in the same boat. And basically, within a week, we one-upped each other into handing in our resignations. And and then I posted a goodbye note on LinkedIn. And the next morning, I wake up to see that 500,000 people have seen my post, and that
Yeah,
hundreds of them are emailing me and saying that they also would like to have an opportunity to solve climate change through their work.
amazing.
Because yeah, because people have spent their whole careers building their skill and their professional ability, and isn't it tempting to use that whole thing to solve climate change rather than being confined to solving it by recycling your trash and calling your representatives, things that
Yeah,
you didn't spend your whole life building ability in. So yeah, that's when we decided to start work on climate. We decided to start a little community to help professionals find a way to make their work into a lever for solving climate change. This was also during the height of COVID, when everybody was
yeah,
having a crisis of meaning. Everybody was really looking for community. So we really were at the right place at the right time. And the community very quickly grew to be the largest community in the world of this sort. And as of now, I'm proud to say that we have helped over 3,000 people find jobs in climate, and over 3,000 founders of climate startups credit us with some kind of progress on our company journey.
that's great to hear. Yeah, one of the many things that stood out for me when I was reading on about work on climate is that you guys started in the middle of the pandemic.
Mhm,
And I was thinking, well, okay, I see many businesses start in the pandemic, but a nonprofit that starts in 2020,
mhm,
it's probably been hard for them. So this follows up on my next question.
mhm,
Um, what do you feel like was the biggest challenge in those early days?
mhm. The biggest challenge throughout the whole thing has been that I didn't know how to run a nonprofit. And the second biggest challenge was that I think that I thought I do. So I was coming from a lifelong career as a software engineer, and I was a really good software engineer. I think now I no longer have to be humble about that because I'm not doing that, but I was really
Yeah,
good. I was like among the best in my area, and I carried that confidence into a completely different activity, running a nonprofit. And I made many mistakes, and I resisted admitting that I made many mistakes in the moment. So I was very lucky to be surrounded by people who were supporting me nevertheless throughout the whole thing and helping me get better. And I think only now, 5 years later, I think I am starting to really get a sense of how to run this thing, but it took a while.
it took a while. Yeah, the training wheels had to come off sometime.
Yeah.
You feel like now that you've been around for 5 years, and looking back, how have you seen the organization change and grow during this time?
Yeah. So during the first about year and a half, it was really a hobby project. We found a few like-minded people to do it together with, all volunteers, all doing it in our free time, and we actually got really far in that way. Then there have been several kind of pivotal moments in the history of the organization. One was in December of 2021.
Yep.
That's when I realized that helping thousands of people is good, but if we ask ourselves how many people in the economy really need to be doing something different with their work in order for us to solve climate change, and the answer is not a few thousand people. The answer is the entire economy. The answer is
Yeah.
hundreds of millions of people. So when I realized that for me was the moment when it was clear that I'm going to be running this nonprofit for the rest of my life, or as long as I'm able to work, or until our work is no longer necessary, because we did all we could and now it's really mainstream. So that was one moment when I went all in, and we started looking for ways to make impact at that scale. And to make impact at that scale, you can't help people one by one. You need to be really changing how the systems around work,
Yep.
like schools, job boards, workforce development agencies, universities, professional societies, and so on. And so we did some amount of work in that direction, quite successful. And then the next, and so far last really big change was about a year ago. So about a year ago, I came in contact with a podcast by Daniel Schmachtenberger about a concept called the polycrisis. So this is a little bit of an advanced concept, so I'll try to explain a little bit.
Yep.
Basically, the idea is that we, humanity, we're collectively facing several really serious crises at the same time. Climate change can really take us down. Breakdown of democracy can take us down. The rising inequality can take us down. The breakdown of global collaboration can take us down through a nuclear war. Destruction of biodiversity can take us down. Existential risks from AI can take us down. So we're facing so many crises that basically we stand zero chance of solving them one by one. So one of them is going to get us if we try to solve them one by one. The flip side of that, kind of the good news, is referred to by the concept of meta crisis, which is that really these are the same crises. So all of these crises are created by the same forces in our economy and society. And these forces are basically, it's our lack of ability to collaborate on hard problems. So these forces are all, what's more commonly known as prisoner's dilemma or tragedy of the commons.
Yep.
Where when a bunch of people are, in the same shared environment, it makes sense for everyone individually to, pull the blanket on themselves and be a freeloader and hope that others will make it healthy. And in the end, it's bad for everyone, and they end up just, destroying it. For example, in case of, a bunch of fishers fishing from the same lake, everybody fishes as much as possible. The lake has no fish left. Now nobody has any fish. While if they, made some agreement to manage it sustainably, it would have been much better. So all of the problems that we're talking about are of the sort, the AI arms race, arms race among fossil fuel companies to keep extracting fossil fuels, even though if they all keep doing it, we're not going to have an economy at all. It's all instances of exactly the same problem. So when I came across that, I realized that getting people into jobs is just not good enough. It's just not powerful enough to confront these types of forces that are really governing our economy the same way that gravity governs our movement. It always points down. Likewise, our economy always points towards individual benefit, which is most of the time at odds with whole system health. So for me, that was also an existential moment in a sense. I started asking myself, should I even be running work on climate, or should I do something else? And something else that really is a match for these really terrifying forces that we're dealing with in our economy and society. And our board was actually in the same place. So they were all like, oh, yeah, I don't think what we're doing is a match for the times we're in, especially when Donald Trump got elected, and all the climate policy evaporated and a lot of the investment in climate evaporated. It became clear that when it comes to this transformative change that needs to happen, politicians are not going to save us. Right? So we're on our own here. And then we spent some time to figure out, how can we do something about this with work on climate? And then we realized that what we have on our hands, we have a community of over 35,000 professionals. And over half of them are actually highly senior people who have 10 or 15 or even more years of work experience. And then we realized that what we really have, it's not a talent pool. It's a source of power. Power in a traditional sense, not in the energy sense. It's a source of leadership. So, and we realize that what we really need to be doing is helping the people that we work with who are passionate to make a difference for climate with their professional strengths. We need to help them become leaders of change. We need to help them transform their companies, change practices at their companies, move the power that their companies wield out there in the economy towards solving climate change. Help them transform their companies, transform their industries, transform their communities, transform the peers that they work with. So turn to leadership. And that's really what we're doing now. So we're helping people become leaders of change in their companies, industries, communities. And this has the potential to create this type of systemic change, especially when you do it in coordination. So when you just help this person become a leader and help that person become a leader, that's not really good enough. But if you take the same, for example, the same city and the same industry in a city, and then help many people throughout different parts of that industry build relationships with each other towards a common vision and start acting together, this is how real systemic change happens. Like if you read one of the 2 or 3 existing books about how to actually do systemic change, this is how to do it. So that's what
Yeah.
we're doing.
It's like the change comes from above and then trickles down to all of the communities, the organizations that are there, right?
It's actually quite the opposite. Systemic change comes from the bottom up most of the time. The kind that
Oh,
comes from top down is, yes, you can do it if you have power. Like Donald Trump has power. He can create systemic change by pulling the $400 billion
yeah,
of funding. So if you have that kind of power, yes, you can do it unilaterally. But most of the time, that type of change is not something that's really good. So the kind that I'm talking about is change that comes from the bottom up, from people becoming leaders, stepping into leadership, even though they're not
okay, no,
executives, they're not, powerful policymakers, but nevertheless, they have some influence. They know the right people in their company and in their industry. They have some authority. They know how to make things make business sense in their
yeah,
industry and so on. So they can do it.
yeah, yeah. And following up on that,
Hmm.
you mentioned that yes, we are turning these people into leaders,
Hmm.
and I see that was one of your programs that that you have on your website. And I know that there are a lot of people in the workforce that do not know how their skills can be helpful for
Hmm.
climate work.
Hmm.
How does your format or your programs, be it expert office hours or bigger this leadership program, help them
Hmm.
take their first step into this?
Yeah, so our community does a number of things that help people see themselves in the climate movement as as contributors and as leaders. I think probably the most important thing that our community does is really give people a sense of community, that they're not alone in this.
Yep.
Because to make this kind of big leap from change from the professional identity of I am just a software engineer who does big data applications, to maybe even to the identity that I'm a software engineer who does big data applications for climate, that's a big change,
Hmm.
right? And most of the time, so many people think that what keeps people in non-impact work is
Yeah.
called the golden handcuffs. But I don't think that's really the main reason. I think the main reason is people's sense of identity. It's that you spent your whole career building up your sense of identity as I'm a big data engineer, I hang out with my big data engineer buddies. Like I'm a UX designer, I hang out with my UX designer buddies, and we nerd out over how to do UX design for SaaS applications for the enterprise, right? And then as you think about making a change, you're like, well, here's my whole life is here, and there I'm nobody, I don't know anyone. I'm going to
Yeah.
be the only person I know who is even thinking about this. Am I crazy? And
Well, that happened to me.
there you go. Yeah, so what our community really does it helps people build those connections, and helps people build a community of others who are also pursuing this path, and that really enables people to persist in their search rather than give up. Then in practical terms, when they're ready to persist, we give them the tools for that. So you mentioned the expert office hours program. It's a program where indeed you can come and simply book time for free with an expert who is already working in some area or areas of climate,
Yep.
and tell them, for example, I'm a mechanical engineer. I know, how do my skills apply in the areas that and the expert may say, for example, well, I'm actually quite familiar with nuclear. It's a powerful climate solution. It's switching power from coal to nuclear, and
Yeah.
nuclear power plants really need mechanical engineers. Here's where you can look into it. Or you can think of any number of examples like that. So people can talk to these experts and learn about their area of expertise in climate and learn how their skills can apply. We also run a number of other programs, but probably one that's most relevant to what I talked to you about regarding leadership. So
Yep.
we have one part of our community, and we're currently expanding this to the whole community, is dedicated specifically to workplace climate leadership. So there we also have expert mentors. So one of them, his name is Drew Wilkinson. He was at Microsoft and he built Microsoft's community of employees focused on climate. He actually built Microsoft's entire infrastructure of communities around
Oh,
all kinds of topics, but his heart was especially with the one focused on climate. And he was so successful that that became part of their official sustainability strategy. Because that community, they don't just make strongly worded statements to executives to please do less AI or please recycle your trash. They work constructively to turn Microsoft's power towards climate, to help them with build product features, lines of business, and so on that use the power of this incredibly large corporation to towards climate. And Microsoft has a lot of efforts on climate in that space. So you can talk to Drew and ask him,
yeah,
how do I exercise workplace climate leadership? How do I do it as an individual? How do I build buy-in with my executives? If I want to do it together with others at my company, which, trust me, you do want to do it together with others, don't do it alone. You can talk to
mhm,
Drew about, how do I find the others? How do I, get us to regularly meet or, organize ourselves?
yeah,
And I'm not talking here about, organizing against leadership. Again, I'm talking about organizing to constructively figure out how to have your company be part of the only economy we're going to have. So we have
yeah.
Drew, we have Ayana from Project Drawdown, who also specialize in this. We have a peer mentorship program there where we help people kind of huddle up into small groups and take themselves into a cadence of self-paced exercises to figure out what they can do and how, and so on. So these are the types of things that we do for people.
I love the community effort, and
Mhm.
that's something I've seen with many nonprofits, and especially with you, Sergin. You've been doing this climate work for about 5 years now. You did some research for yourself, besides just watching the Al Gore movies. You read the literature,
Mhm.
and there's one thing that I always like to ask these nonprofits is that I've noticed that organizations working in specific issues, like, for example, food aid, homelessness, environmental causes, often
Mhm.
gain unique insights or perspectives
Mhm.
that most people might not be aware of. For you, working in climate for 5 years now, what
Mhm.
is that one key insight or perspective you wish more people truly understood about climate work?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for most people to understand about it is that this is something that you can really move through your work. So we actually did research. We did a survey of, a nationwide survey in America of climate concerned and climate alarmed Americans, and we learned that out of this population who are, probably spending a lot of time thinking about what do we do about this, even among them, only 12% even understand that work can be a lever towards solving climate. And this is no baffling. Like, where do you think climate solutions come from? People build them. That's where they come from. They come from rebuilding existing companies, from rebuilding existing industries, from building new infrastructure. That's work. That's all it is. And the vast majority of people still think that it comes from, recycling your trash and calling your representatives. Sure, keep doing that. That's also good, but that's not really where the power comes from ultimately. So I think this is the most important thing for people to understand, that there is a tremendous amount of work happening to solve climate change. There is work like this happening in every single industry, from energy to healthcare to transportation to construction to manufacturing. Everywhere there are efforts happening. Certainly these efforts are not happening fast enough, but they are happening, and they're happening through the hands of people who work in those industries.
Yeah, from people who care too. You mentioned that, yeah, you can, like someone that's in a workplace, they can even contact you, be more aware of
Mhm.
how they can implement some of these climate works to restructure their business and to be more helpful for climate change.
Yeah, I will actually add one more thing here. So when I just left Google, I came across a report by PricewaterhouseCoopers called State of Climate Tech. That was in 2021. And that
Yeah,
report showed that at the time, venture capital investment in climate tech was a quarter of all venture investment. It was either the biggest or the second biggest category of investment in that year. And it was shocking to me. I was thinking, like, why is this not on the front page of New York Times? Like, ask anyone on the street, how much private investment do you think is going to climate? And they're going to say, like, what are you talking about? There's no private investment in climate. There's only public investment. It's the government doing that. And actually a quarter of all private investment was going into it, right? So tremendous amount of work happening and receiving investment. Right now there's a bit of a pullback, but it's still double digits. So it's still a huge amount.
Yeah, so good to know that
Hmm.
maybe even if like the public investment in it is diminishing throughout the years, maybe private is keeping up with it or just increasing. Um, yeah, that's
Well,
something to be hopeful about.
yeah, honestly, it's not increasing. So this year, private investment retreated a little bit as well because the political climate does influence
Yep.
people. It's still a lot. So I don't want to paint like a completely rosy picture that we have, so much private investment going into it that we're going to be fine. We're not going to be fine. That's why our work is needed and the work of others in the climate movement is needed. But there is momentum, and there is, a momentum and a movement for you to join and do it alongside other passionate and powerful people.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know that
Yeah.
in the future,
Hmm.
and even in the present, we gotta be there. We gotta help each other. We gotta be more aware about climate change and the climate works that go into the many of these private institutions that you mentioned. And so, Eugene, for my last question, and this is something that I always like to end with,
Hmm.
and speaking of the future too, what do you see work on climate doing in the next 5 years? Any big projects or goals you're especially excited about?
Yeah, so really our objective for the next 5 years is to prove and scale this model of activating professionals to transform their industries. So we're starting by helping people in our community, mostly on a large scale individual level, become leaders. But then the immediate next step after that is, like I mentioned, to do this within specific cities and industries.
Yep.
And then when we prove that, for example, let's say you can really, dramatically reduce the amount of food waste in a city by working together with people from food processors, manufacturers, growers, restaurants, distributors, and so on. So food waste, by the way, it's probably the second biggest contributor to climate change because it takes a massive amount of emissions to grow food, and then we throw away half of it. So once we prove that you can do this, then we will begin thinking, how can we scale this? How can we not just create more and more such, cells in industries and cities of transforming certain industries, but how can we make it so that this starts happening without our involvement? So basically, our objective over the next 5 years is to turn this into a distributed movement that does not depend on us anymore.
Yeah, get the ball rolling, as I say.
Yeah.
Well, that's great to hear, Eugene. And with that hopeful vision of the future, we'll wrap up today's conversation. Thank you so much for sharing the impact work on climate is having in the community on a global scale. And for anyone listening, if you like to get involved, whether by fundraising or volunteering, you can check out the links in the description. And as always, thank you all for watching. And Eugene, thank you once again for your time and your work because for me, climate change is something that's very important.
I imagine. Yeah. Thanks so much, Oliver. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
being
Bye.